Jacksonville, Georgia.
Advocating sales tax. And what happened is they had a merchants protest. I mean, the papers could hardly do anything else because all the advertisers were just absolutely opposed to it. And they had a march on the Capitol. That was years before Martin Luther King. They stayed just walk on the Capitol and fill up the galleries, and it was quite an evening when they came over. And, they defeated it. But actually, he was a good fellow. He was a dreamer. He was smart as he could be. He was tremendously proud of Georgia, and particularly the young people in Georgia. And he was just willing to do anything as far as education was concerned. Of course, he was the father of the welfare program, highway patrol, and just about everything that we have built on since 1935. And although he had his critics, none of them have ever advocating doing away, abolishing or repealing those things. They've all expanded on them.
That's right.
So he was 25, 30 years.
Well, in fact, it's this station in Florida that I've ordered. It says this, that he paved the way really for modern Georgia. And one thing he mentioned, which I hadn't thought of, but it's obvious, in centralizing the state some, putting a lot of things under the state that the counties had been left up to the counties.
Well, his free school books and business of relieving the taxes on pots and pans and household kitchen furniture, which today seems just almost ridiculous, but at that time, people were having their kitchen utensils and their beds solely from the courthouse door. Because they were not able to pay taxes.
Did that happen a lot? I mean, selling...
It did happen. It did happen, and it was a law. You could do it. And so what he was just trying to do is just see that it wouldn't happen again. And he just took the position that if it even happened to one poor person, then it ought to be stopped. And I don't know. I can think of so many conversations I had with him about things of that nature. And he himself gave everything that he had, including his law practice. If he had a person that he liked, or somebody that was supporting him politically or something, get in trouble in Little Rissy or Savannah or Hinesville or Macon or wherever, that they called and said that they needed him, well, he didn't ever ask him what to. They never talked to him about a fee. He just said, I'll be there. And he had one of the quickest minds and had one of the best legal minds that I've ever seen. And had he just confined himself to the practice of law, there's no telling where he would have gone, because he was brilliant. And not only was he a good office lawyer, but he was the best advocate that I've ever seen. I've known him as long as I can remember. He and my father were friends from the time that he came from over here to Lakeland. And, of course, I knew him when I was in grammar school, but by the time I started in high school, I had already decided that I wanted to practice law at some time. So whenever we had a term of court, we had 3 terms of court here, school court, each year, in March, October, and a summer term in June. And he was always there and was always interested in most of the cases in those terms of court. And I either played hooky with my father's permission, spent most of that time when I ought to have been in school in the courthouse when he was trying cases. And that's where he and I became real close. And then when I came out of the University of Athens during the Depression, nobody had anything. And so he had opened the law office here and had purchased the local newspaper. He and a friend of mine named James Tower, who died shortly after that. So Ed and James Tower and I practiced law, and John Gray and I ran the newspaper for him. And so that was my friendship with him. And then when He was in the House at the time, and my father was in the House. And so Ed started running for Speaker in 1930, I reckon. And so he and I just traveled around the state contacting members of the House. He was elected that term, and then immediately when he became Speaker, he immediately started his campaign for governor, and he served 2 terms as Speaker, and then from there went into the governor's office with the combination of Senator Russell, Governor Rivers, Mr. Columbus Roberts, who was Commissioner of Agriculture, and President Roosevelt, who was the 4 R's. And the relationship with President Roosevelt was always good.
You were executive secretary then. What about in the 38 campaign? I know that Roosevelt sent Bob McIntyre down here to try to find somebody, and he couldn't, so he ran Florence Graham. But I mean, he was somebody strong.
Yeah, he was of course, interested in defeating Senator George, and the only person he could get to run was Lawrence Camp, who was the United States District Attorney in Atlanta. Well, Lawrence had nothing to lose. Had he been elected governor, it was fine, and the president was going to take care of him anyway. But Senator George had just opposed him, particularly in his fight to pack the Supreme Court. And he just became so upset with him until he just announced publicly at Barnesville that he was going to get him opposition. Didn't make it. Didn't do anything.
Did he?
On that particular day, I was there. On that particular day, when Senator George was just sitting 2 or 3 seats from the president, and after the president had announced that Lawrence Camp would be the person to run, or announced that he would have opposition, well, since George didn't do anything, but the Morris said he got up and Mr. President, I accept the challenge, and the crowd just went crazy, and that was probably the biggest crowd that political gathering of any kind said they had. It was the opening of the first REA co-op, they had about 45,000 people were there to play with.
What did Governor Rivers do? I mean, he was sort of called being
1938?
Yes, being friend. I mean, he was running for governor, but
1938, he had already advocated the sales tax, and he in the Atlanta newspapers had followed that, and it was just a knockdown, drag-out fight. We had an awful time getting re-elected. At that time, you ran every 2 years, and it was just a knockdown, drag-out fight in the governor's race with Hugh Howell, but he won.
But I mean, did he take any position on the George thing?
Yeah, he was friendly to Senator George. I mean, he didn't. I don't recall. I mean, we couldn't very well because I had hands too full of trying to get him reelected. So we didn't take any real active interest in it. But I personally was for Senator George. Senator George's younger son, Marcus, and I were in college, and we were up at Riverside Military together, and Riverside Military Academy, and then with Turner Brothers at the university. And Marcus used to visit down here with us a great deal. And he and my father were real good friends. So I always support Senator George.
What about Jim Gillis then? He supported Lawrence Camp, and then I read in the papers that there was the 38 campaign, then there was the Miller split, but just before the Miller split broke out into the open, I read that Gillis and Rivers were becoming estranged. Do you remember?
Yeah, that was part of the Roosevelt Lawrence Camp thing. But the Linton Miller thing was the fact that Mr. Miller just became ambitious and started running for governor. The governor asked him to cease and desist or to give up the post, and Mr. Miller didn't want to do it because that was a good place to operate from.
Yeah.
And so that was that trouble. They had been friends from the very time that Ed came to Cairo, and then Mr. Lent, and Ed came to Lakeland for the purpose of creating a new county and to start operating from that base, and they did, and they were in the bank together, and they were close partners.
Rivers sort of started Lanier County, didn't he?
Yeah. They came over and formed and he got the legislation passed and everything to create a new county, so that But Lakeland, Milltown at that time could be a county side, and if they went ahead with it.
We'll give you a base to start off in the politics.
Because otherwise,
The county is.
he would have been in the county with us, and part of that county was taken from Darien, part from Destin, I believe part from Atkinson. So what they wanted was a county side and a county courthouse, and it was being done all over the state.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the way that our county has proliferated, and believe me, we have 159 now.
I'm afraid we'll never get them back down again once we get started.
If they went to a voluntarily merged, I'm afraid that they had nothing to do it.
But back to the Gillis thing now, did Gillis, again, just from my reading in the papers, did Gillis support Miller on this? And, well, apparently Gillis was possibly a gubernatorial candidate.
He didn't, no, I don't think he supported Mr. Miller. It was just a knockdown, drag out fight between Lent and Ed. And Mr. Gillis stayed on, and Lawson Patton was appointed, and Lawson served as chairman. No, I don't think Mr. Gillis had any real hand in that. It was just between Ed and Lent.
Everybody else just stayed back with him.
It was a spectacle.
Must have been.
It sure was.
But Miller wouldn't give it up. He wouldn't give up.
Anybody running for government would like to be chairman of the highway board.
And he got good publicity in the process. The paper. Let me ask you this: the paper certainly got sour on it. But one person told me, and I don't know if it's true or not, that one of the things, well, several people have told me, was Gallagher. I can't pronounce it. Caligula, Gaggle, was a part of it, of the split with Atlanta Journal.
That very well could be. He was, globally was part of the Atlanta Journal family. And of course, they worked for years and years to get him out. And his mother and his wife both were very fine, attractive ladies. They just almost haunted the governor's office. They were in there almost daily. They were not obnoxious or anything. They were just after their husband. They were trying to do something. They helped their husband and son. They were charming people. And I think probably it may have had something to do with it.
The other thing I heard, and I've only heard this one time, was that, Cox bought out the journal and all like that. And they asked Rivers to go down and meet Cox at the airport. Rivers told him, no, I don't think we ought to have two papers. Did that happen?
I think it did happen, and he was disappointed that the ownership of the biggest papers in the state went to outside interests and that kind of thing. And it was a popular thing as far as his politics concerned. To jump on the Coxes, they were out-of-state people. It's like somebody jumping on the biggest corporation in the county or the state. Always popular side to jump on the power company and talk on the company or somebody big, And but he just felt that it was not best for Georgia. They had they really turned around.
Oh yeah, I've read them from 36 through 40, and it's just it's almost a somersault for a period of about 6 months.
I imagine that both of them are to blame. They can be pretty demanding.
Well, the Atlanta papers always had a reputation of being so liberal. Really, and this was still when they were on his side. They were taking him to task for not publishing the list of everybody who got old age pension. And I thought to myself and reading it, here's a liberal Atlanta newspaper, and because Rivers wouldn't do it. He got to his credit.
To show you how times have changed, get back to this thing about being ahead of his time. At one time, I recall that he asked for a review of all the prison inmates in Georgia. And at Christmas time, he released 1,000, 1,100, 1,900 or something. By and large, they were people who were forgotten. They were people who of no benefit at all as far as being able to work and that kind of thing, but choice. And they just ranted and raved. But now today they editorially endorse and commend because those people are costing money. So he gets right back to that thing. If he was just, had he been living today, I reckon he'd been conservative. But then he was liberal.
You were not executive secretary when I guess all the parties and stuff came in.
No, but what happened is Mr. W. Harrison was comptroller general and he died. And it was just at the end of the term, and actually didn't know what anybody would actually wanted because you get right into a campaign and that kind of thing. And so he asked me if I would go over there, and I did. So all of that came from June until sometime in January when all those charges were made. And I had no connection.
This person that's doing something in town, he told me he thought the way it probably happened in town administration was that a local lawyer who had political influence would ask for a pardon, and then the person would pay the lawyer. You think maybe that's always what happens sometimes?
You got to remember that at that time they had the old pardon and parole board with 3 members, and they sent all they did whatever they thought they needed to do in way of recommendations and that kind of thing, and it was all fixed on a big old file, and we'll have to get out of things up. And they would pass on them, and they would either recommend it, give parole be granted, or it be denied. And it came downstairs, and then the governor could overrule them, or he could agree with them. And of course, all the pardoning power was in his hands, and the power to grant clemency and death sentences and that kind of thing. So in addition to the duties that the governor's office now has, we had all of that. And even the misdemeanors came down, and we had to pass on all of those things. So it was a pretty good job. Yeah. And of course the governor couldn't do it. We did it. I did it the best I could. So I don't know what happened between June and January, but it was a chore to get those things done, because when you get everything else in the afternoon that you thought you had your dead clear, or somebody from pardon and parole board come downstairs with a stack of files about this high of action that they had taken probably over the last 3 or 4 days. And it was things you just had to get to. So if it was a bad situation, or a controversial situation, or if there were letters in it that people really requested hearings and that kind of thing, of course, we'd take it up to the governor and ask him to do it. If we didn't, we'd use our own judgment and either agree with the pardon and parole board, or if we want to turn it down, we talk about it.
That probably
Additionally, we had to have all the extradition hearings and that kind of thing. Of course, they come to the governor's office now, but they have a assistant attorney general who is on that now, but we had to do it.
They did everything. No, I just looked at the pardons records, and gosh, it's that big every year. Outside then, I wasn't going to go through it.
Well, the same thing about it is that what you run into in the ordinary run of Superior Court in a term in Hartwell, some fellow would beat his wife, or steal a hog, or an automobile, or make moonshine or something. And if you could go through those files, in most instances, you'd find that either the judge or the solicitor general or the man had gotten all the members of the jury, or a jury who convicted him, or a majority of the jury, and he'd have letters from the warden who'd say that and that kind of thing. Saying he hadn't rehabilitated himself and he was going to do what he did. But actually, I think that the record would show that of all the people that he released, that the people who returned were probably less than the percentage are now. And the reason I think that is true, because we were coming out of the worst depression this country has ever known. And so by the time of the end of his term, the recovery had started, and those people who were in the penitentiary and were released had a pretty good opportunity of getting a job, and that may have been a WPA job or something, but actually, they could find something to do because the economy was expanded, and from 1935, 36, it expanded up until the present time.
I hadn't thought about that. And I suspect maybe being during the Depression probably drove a lot of people to steal and things like that they wouldn't have otherwise.
Yeah, it was not uncommon to look up and see this woman come in with 4, 5, or 6 children, and them hungry and destitute, and said my father, and my husband was Joe Blow, and he served down in Canton. Would you please review his file and tell me what the pardon parole board is down here? And couldn't take him to done. What's that you do it? Try to see if you would help them. And so you pull the file and go through it, and it would tell that you feel it was justified for you. But times were hard. People were selling apples on the street and eating out of garbage cans and that kind of thing. And I know when I first went to Atlanta around 1933, I'm leaving the first elected speaker. You walk from the integrated to the drink floor down any place downtown, and people were in the garbage cans and selling pencils and apples on the street and that kind of thing. And it's just hard for people to.
You can't imagine that. Really.
That's right. I mean, if you're old enough now to recall it, it's just hard to believe that you ever witnessed it. But it was true, and of course that was a lot of your crime. People stealing. Or doing something to try to help get their families some bread.
What about in the speaker's thing? When he was speaker, of course, he started out pro-town and then
well, he and Roy Harris and Gene Talmadge and John Spider was president of the Senate when Ed was governor. They were all real good friends, and they just finally disagreed with Mr. Talmadge more than anything else. That is take over the universal system and that kind of thing. Of course, it was the popular side, and of course Mr. Talmadge had sided against Mr. Roosevelt. And Mr. Roosevelt was going to be elected, and when he started advocating old age pensions and that kind of thing, that was just right down his line. Of course, Mr. Talmadge was diametrically opposed to old age pensions and that kind of thing. And it just one of those things that had to happen. He was a real conservative, and they were getting on the New Deal, and so they right in a way for them to stay together. So it's just one of those things that happened. And they had the popular side of it. The new day was coming. But Ed and Gene Talmadge were always the best of friends. They fight and fuss and campaign and storm at one another, but they were the closest of personal friends. Let me know even up to the time that Mr. Talmadge died.
Well, as you said,
like lawyers fight.
Yeah. It was just business relations.
Sure. And Mr. Talmadge just didn't believe in any part of the New Deal. And of course, Ed and them just absorbed it completely. And so Mr. Talmadge elected to run against Senator Russell, and he just designated Mr. Redwine to run against Ed. And so the issue was joined, and of course Mr. Roberts joined in.
Oh, well, that's right. Roberts went to commission.
Yeah.
Well, now, this is something that when I start asking them this, I really don't know, but I
got one thing confused. I was on a cotton thing like that was the Arizona issue.
Oh, yeah. Well, that sort of gets into what I wanted to ask you about. Several books I've read said that Ed Williams had I hate to use the word machine because that has a bad connotation, but I don't mean it in a bad way. Had a very strong political machine all the way up through the 50s.
Well, actually, he had a lot of people who started with him in that first race that he made in 1920 or sometime. That was before I ever knew anything but high school and elementary school. But my father was for him even then, and he supported him in every race that he ever. In fact, he carried this candidate every time he ever ran for anything that the people could vote for him. And the same thing was true in a good number of counties all over the state. He had people in Hart County and Elbert County. There were maybe not too many of them, but he always had a nucleus. And a lot of times we would leave Atlanta possibly coming thinking we were coming home. God, we might have lined up in Delano. If 2 or 3 people wanted to hear him speak or something, you know, and if somebody invited us to spend the night with them, I'd go to a basketball game. I remember one night we got started home and wound up in Ricewalk. Spending the night with Charlie Claxton, who was a representative in Johnson County at that time. We went to a basketball game, and Charlie Claxton introduced him during the half, and he made a talk to him. The basketball game, what I'm getting on.
Everybody I talked to him said that he really was a speaker, that he used to drop it down and he could start.
He called me one night. We were out in Atlanta together. I was at the drink when he was down to Integrated. And he called me and said, "What are you doing?" I said, I just haven't done it. I'm not doing anything in the morning. And he said, "I'm in a little trouble. What about coming and going with me?" And I said, "All right, where are you going?" He said, "I've got to make a speech." So I called a cab, took my car and picked him up or something. He was late for me. We went out on Spring Street, about Georgia Tech someplace. We had a bad time finding the place we were going. And finally, we found a stairway that led up into a second-story building. And we got up there. This place was just filled with 200 or 300 people. And he got up there, and this person who had invited him to speak met us at the door. And we shook hands with him, and he said, "By the way," he said, "who are these people?" And he said, "It's Alcoholics Anonymous." That's the first time. So there was such a thing with Alcoholics Anonymous, and he said, "Well, how do you do it?" He said, "We try to sober up and try to get our friends to sober up." So he said, "Fine." So that was the best speech I have ever heard him make, I believe. And he didn't know who the group was or anything else until we walked to the door.
Oh, that's funny.
So my mother, who didn't really think that she'd go to heaven unless you remember the Baptist Church, thought he was the best Baptist preacher. That she knew that he had a lot of faults, and she knew that he did something that good Baptists didn't. But she still thought he was the best Baptist preacher that she ever saw. She loved him to death.
Somebody said at one time they had to sober. He got drunk just before the speech. And they poured coffee and they put him in the shower. They said an hour before the speech they didn't know whether. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
What, was that by day or where?
I think it was by day. My brother was living at the time. I think that's probably where we all were. But he was this kind of person. You could call him and say, "Well, I'm involved in this lawsuit. Landline or automobile accident or whatever it was. Do you want to get into it or do you want to come help me with the thing?" He said, "Well, sure." But when he said that meant that you would do the legwork and have the briefs all ready and have the petition filed. And he would show up probably about the time she thought he was not going to get there at all by the time he got ready to start the jury and that kind of thing. And he walked in and he said, "What's this thing about?" And in 5 words, you'd tell him that your client was killed in an automobile accident or something happened. And so he said, "Well, do you want me to handle the question or what you want me to do?" And we just told him. And when he did, he just marched right through it. And he had total recall, and he had unlimited confidence in his ability to get across and that kind of thing, which he could do. And he never ceased to amaze me. I don't know. I heard him. I don't know how much time I heard him speak. I don't go to very many speeches anymore. But I heard him speak 3,000 times or something, and I don't believe I ever heard him make really a bad one. He didn't read a prepared speech too well. He ever got into it, and he thought it was a fun, and he took it and threw it away. And when he did that, he just marched right through. But he was a preacher, and I loved him. And of all the things that I have ever heard bad about him, either in print or somebody who didn't like him, I never heard him say a bad thing about an individual. I've never heard him discuss doing bad things. I mean, to me, he just stops.
Several people remark about that I don't know whether I can capture or not, but his spirit, his mood, and also, as you said, the fact that he never got...
Well, they charge him with being dishonest, but if there's anybody in the world that ever scrupulously honest and gave everything he had, including his time. And actually, he never had any money until after he left the governor's office. He borrowed money. I think I know the source that he borrowed no part of it to build this radio station in Valdosta. And that was the first time that he ever had any money at all. Got it. The poor fellow, his socks were usually pulled in, and his shoes were usually worn on the bottom, and those blue suits and bow ties that he wore, they were pretty shiny. And I can recall he was trying to sell his stove and that kind of thing. And when we first started the governor's race in 1934, the biggest and finest property we had was a standoff company credit card. That was a dilapidated Chrysler automobile. But as long as we could, the third good shape was standoff company, and we could get about and do every meal I pleased people that we could eat and sleep and that kind of thing. So.
Well, he apparently he did have this quality where he made friends and they were loyal to him. I don't know.
Well, he did that by helping them. I mean, if he were alive today in London, I wouldn't hesitate a minute to call him and say, "Ed, I need you." And he said, "Well, how bad?" And he said, "Bad." He said, "I'll be there as quick as I can get there." And not only me, but anybody that he liked. And he had a fine working relationship with the members of the General Assembly. Of course, that was the backbone of his race for government. And with them, and then of course he built through the counties and that kind of thing. And then the Musgrove thing coming along, it just was all just a jigsaw. And he saw it all coming, and he just put it all together. But we opened a campaign for government in 1945. We had 1 room, 219 residential hotel. And no money. And one secretary, Gertrude Live. She's not married and doing it now. And Gertrude and I were the staff. And John Grill was coming in town every once in a while. And very shortly though, this thing started picking up. And it wasn't too long before we had all of one floor of the drink line. It was overflowed all over the place. And then, of course, help started coming Melwood in.
Bandwagon type of thing. What about in 46? I've heard several stories, and I even read a quote on yours about why he decided to run in 46.
Well, he thought he could make it because he would like to have been getting all the time. And he just thought that he could make it, and he thought by that time that maybe the state had caught up, and that now they were ready for further expansion and that kind of thing. And he just felt like he was the person who could do it.
Oh, supposedly he thought he had an understanding. Well, I think, I won't say where I got this from, but supposedly he thought he had an understanding with the Army. Is that the recollection?
That's brought out, yeah, and that fell through. He got illustrated off with the Crown newspaper and that kind of thing. And they took care of that. We've got Ellis and Edward together and other campaigns for A&B Thompson, where they joined forces and kind of left him eat. And there were other times perhaps that they were.
Yes, sir. I got all this stuff here now. A book by Byrne, for example, said, in 46, he supported Thompson in the governor's fight. Originally, after 46, Tam was reelected in the National Committee.
Right.
And then the fight came up.
Right.
Thompson. And then he tried to get control of the Democratic Executive Committee in 47, of course, they changed.
Yeah.
What was the reason for that?
Forgotten that. I forgot that from the beginning. Probably was an active commitment. Probably rival time or some of it, I don't know. Just a blank. John would probably know, because John was Secretary of the State Democratic Executive Committee.
Oh, yeah.
Asked him.
Back to the 46 campaign, well, of course, one story is that Talmadge put him up to it. I don't believe that too much.
No, that is not true.
Well, in fact, in an interview that he made with someone else, it's in another thesis.
No, that's absolutely not true, because he thought he could win it, and then he and Talmadge both became so incensed with Carmack until probably did get a little help in the wind-up, but Talmadge did. He's not that kind of fellow. You didn't put him in and take him out. He got in on his own.
This was my impression of it, just from sifting what I got, is that he got in on his own.
Right.
Now, see,
it was just not the time.
Right, and well, apparently he started off right good, and then fell behind, and that perhaps the Talmadge people did give him money right there at the end, that he was just fighting that.
I don't think they gave him the money. Because money was hard to get, and they were needing all they could get themselves. But you didn't put him in or take him out. He stood on his own feet. And if he got beat, that's all right. He didn't kill him, he come right back. But there was, I guess we were talking about a while ago, there were counties all over the state that he could always carry.
What, do you remember right off what counties they were? Some of them in DOK, but I don't.
They were this one, and all the counties in this particular area, and then there were counties like Long, Liberty, and I wouldn't intend to go there, but they're not a record.
Yeah, just
from the statistical record. I could name them pretty sure with that.
And it would show up in the honor election, I guess.
Yeah.
And probably in the tops.
Right. Well, it was the state at that time, you remember, was a county unit system thing. And the counties were either Talmadge and Talmadge. And to make that difference who ran, they just didn't go for Talmadge. This county never went for Talmadge until the last race at Herman made it within me. And
well, now, Dan, he had said that he supported supported Talmadge against him in the 50s. Is that right?
Yeah, we all did. We just all told him he didn't have a chance, and that he shouldn't make the race, but he didn't listen. And so this county went for him, and I believe Linnell did, and Packard did.
Now, I've read that the way you figured out when you run it, you figured this county we can't get anyway. This county we got, I'll speak to them after the election. These are in the diet, and these you can buy. Is that sort of the way it went?
I don't know. You may have been able to put some money in some counties, but you just couldn't buy them. If you would put $100 a county, that's $159,000. Yeah. And we're talking about 1935, and we're talking about 1946, not 1970.
I think
$159,000 was a lot of money at that time. And of course, to put $100 wouldn't help at all. So what you're talking about, 6, 7, 800,000, 15, and well, anytime you multiply that by the 159 counties,
Well, apparently there were just a few that way.
There were probably individuals who maybe control a precinct, or maybe the person strong enough it may be, and probably money was given to them.
Yeah.
But it was not it's not buying counties are not what was more talk, because you just didn't have the money to do it with. And golly, if you kept your postage and your telephone bills and your posters and that kind of thing, it all runs on the money in a hurry. And you just don't have that kind of money, because like you may have, and you would, I know, in this county, for instance, we didn't go to Atlanta and ask anybody to give us money to do what we were going to do down here. We did it ourselves. And of course, that was never a part, and we still do, and it's still not a part of the general campaign fund.
It comes more from your local leaders.
Yeah, we do it because we're interested, because we don't want somebody else to beat us if we can help it. And you usually got your people in the courthouse running and that kind of thing. And so, I don't know how you would get enough money to send to 159 candidates.
Oh, I don't think you could do it that way. In fact, I think you probably buy counties more now than you ever did because you buy time on TV. That's just my opinion that I tell. To tell my students, but I didn't know, like, money to haulers or things like that. Not buy votes and
that's one of the worst things about being connected with a statewide campaign, that everybody comes in and they're Joe Blow from the 1245th precinct of Hart County, and for $50, you give me $50 and I'll haul voters all that day and all that kind of thing. Well, you just have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. And the last statewide campaign that I was connected with, colored preachers. I didn't know there were that many colored preachers in the world. They coming in, and all of them, well, the leader, according to their own admission, they were trying to stand with people in their communities, and from there they would deliver. I didn't know there was that many churches.
I'm going to turn this in the other. Well, no, it's got more. I don't want it to run out, so it is.